and broadcast.
All right, well, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everybody to this special meeting of the Lakota Board of Education. Ms. Logan, will you please call roll?
Mrs. Casper? Here. Mrs. O'Connor? Here. Mrs. Schaefer? Here. Mr. Lovell?
Here. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I would like to move to amend the agenda and the meeting notice to say the following. The board will hold a meeting on Friday, September 25th to choose and appoint a candidate in order to allow for fair and equal consideration for all 50 candidates. And I actually have that. It's easier if you see it. I think it is to prepare it. Given the extraordinary number of candidates that we've had apply, which is thrilling, I think, for all of us, we're allowed 30 days by law to complete the decision process. And we can't take our time because the law allows us to give equal and fair consideration to all candidates. We have the chance to handle this in a more transparent and open process.
There's a motion on the floor. A second. Hearing no second, Jenny, does this go back to the original? The motion is, okay.
Correct. So now you'll need a motion to approve the agenda.
Okay.
That the amendment died for lack of a second.
Okay. Do I have an motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Ms. Logan?
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mrs. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mrs. O'Connor?
Yes.
Mr. Lovell?
Yes.
Mr. Lovell, I have a point of order.
Okay.
I am disappointed that the board and my fellow board members were not willing to second the motion for discussion. But I would like to bring forward a concern that I have, which is that one member of this board needs to address one more thing. And my concern is that one member of this board chose to circumvent the process and to meet individually with a candidate without the other 3 members of the board present. And I don't think that's fair to the board. I don't think that's fair to the other candidates. And I don't understand, Mr. Lovell, what your intent was in doing so.
Okay, thank you for that. I mean, I think we meet with people in the community all the time.
During this process, to choose to meet with a candidate who had already applied in a personal one-on-one interview without the rest of the board is unfair to the other candidates. It's unfair to the rest of the board.
Thank you for your feedback.
I think it demonstrates a lack of professionalism, and I'm afraid it puts a bias into this process.
Okay, thank you. I mean, with 52 candidates and the amount of engagement we all have in the community, I'm not confident to say that I haven't had interactions with other people that have applied in that time as well. And in no conversation I've had, have I directly discussed the process, because the process hasn't been developed. We're talking about the process tonight. So, I mean, I guess I appreciate your concern, but there's nothing that occurred that we all have the ability to have conversations with people. And if you think there's bias that's been brought into that, that's a personal opinion that you bring.
And my concern is the lack of transparency. And again, the rest of the board was not there, or were not there.
Okay.
So I consider it completely inappropriate and unprofessional. The board was discussed during that conversation. And if I understand you correctly, are you saying there were other conversations that you had?
No, oh, come on. Okay, so here's what I'm gonna say. There are probably 3 conversations that I can identify right now that you have had conversations with people in the community, not related to this process, but with legislators and with political leaders that you have never shared with this group, which is board action. And so if we want to go down that path, we can talk about inappropriate conversations, but we're not, because we are here to celebrate the fact that we have 52 applicants that have signed up and said that they want to serve our families, our students, and our community. And honestly, we have the process laid out. We have 7 days or 10 days for application. We had an overwhelming response. We've had a ton of people step up to the plate and say that they wanted to give feedback based on thought exchange. We have a calendar laid out. People are ready for interviews this weekend, and we have an opportunity to bring somebody on this board that's going to continue to move this district forward. I'm not quite confident why you feel the need to continually bring up this idea of transparency. Everything we're going to discuss tonight is out in the open in the forum. We're going to put it out here. We can wrestle around with it. I think that it's just a way to erode the trust in the community with this board. And I'm done with it. I really honestly am. Because you know what? I love this place. I love this community. I am a stakeholder to the extreme. And I am sad. I am just sad that you're choosing to take us down this path of destruction of this district. And I'm done.
Your accusations are patently false.
Great. All right, let's move on.
And the path of destruction was not started by me.
Let's move on.
I did not taint this process by behavior that's unprofessional.
Okay, we're moving on to the review of the process of the board member appointment. All right, you all have in front of you a sheet. It's the employment process. One of the things I did want to note to the community is that this process, the reason we're discussing it now is because obviously it's part of open session, which is what I just alluded to. I have, as board president, I have the ability to bring forward this process to the team in coordination with our legal counsel and in coordination with our legal counsel. What I did was, because we want to make sure this is free of bias and we want to make sure that this is out in the open and transparent, I have met with frequent board presidents that have gone through this process, districts that have gone through this process, to better understand their processes that they went towards. Mrs. O'Connor has given us the OSBA stuff. We have taken that, we've adapted that, and then we've also taken the processes in these other districts to then present to you tonight the appointment process ahead of you. I'm going to read through this, and obviously this is open to discussion for the entire board. This is nothing that needs a motion or approval, but it's something that we need to move forward with as we move into executive session tonight, because our goal is to go from the 50-something candidates down to what I have put on here as 14 individuals for consideration in an interview. All right. First up, I had asked the board to bring with them up to 10 candidates for consideration tonight. And so what we did was basically say, look through all the applicants, bring up to 10 back that you're going to be able to come in here and be able to defend to the entire group. When I say defend, it's ability to really talk about the key attributes of those candidates from your perspective. One of the things that I heard very clearly from the last board meeting is this idea that how do I make sure that my lone voice, my individual voice is heard? And this is the best way that I've heard and seen from other districts that have been able to do this. Number one at the meeting, I think, is imperative for us, and I'm sure it won't go well with everybody, but I think that once we move into executive session, our phones need to remain at the door. You can turn them on so you can hear a notice, and if you need to walk to your phone, you can do that. But being in fairness and making sure that things remain confidential for the protection of our candidates, I think that we leave all of our phones by the door. Each applicant name will be written on the board in the front of the room. And so the idea is we're going to put all the names on the board. Then each board member is going to be coming up in alphabetical order to put a dot by that candidate's name. And then what we'll do is you'll be able to talk about each candidate as you put those dots up. That's going to get us to the ability to kind of see if there's overlap of candidates that were chosen individually by the entire group. Matt and Jenny are in here. They're going to be our note takers. They are not active participants in this process. They're management, but they will be having the ability to take notes and write down those key attributes. I chose them to do that because I was confident that if one of us were chosen to do that, there might be someone or some people that might say that I didn't copy the right things down or things weren't put up there. So I want to make sure that that is bias-free as well, and that we have a third party doing that. We're going to consider the thought exchange. We had significant results from our community, and we're going to be going over the key kind of takeaways. All the board members received the thought exchange information today from Mrs. Fuller. And so what we want to do is we want to take the community's considerations at hand, what they said, and we want to make sure we're aligning those with the attributes that we've determined. Our goal is to take all that information and narrow it down to 14 applicants. The reason we went to 14 and not 15 is because it divided between the 2 days more evenly. I said up to 14, and that was important because obviously I think out of respect of all of our candidates, I think they'd appreciate it. We want to make sure we're bringing back people that we want to seriously consider for the role. I think that bringing people in just to bring people in is not a well-used spent of their time. Everybody's very busy. Let's see here, board members, so here's where last time I talked, I believe this is a little bit different, and this is just a thought that I wanted to throw out, is that we talked about bringing back 5 questions from that OSBA sheet, which is perfectly fine, we can do that. The more I thought about it, and I believe Mrs. O'Connor brought this up last time, she had suggested that we each should be able to have a question that we ask, and now what we have to ensure is that the same questions are asked to every single candidate. We can't be going off script, and I actually have documents I'll forward from Human Resources to each of you that I received late day today that kind of goes over some of the protections that we have to make sure that we're doing in the interview process. But what I was thinking is that we could agree on 2 questions as a board from there's no SBA list, and then each of us would have what we consider a unique question. That's 6 total questions for 30 minutes, which I think would be a lot of questions. I think 6 is probably the right amount. Anything more than that, I'm not quite sure we'll get through all the questions in a half hour. I'm going to stop there, and before we get to the after the meeting, I thought maybe we could just break this up in chunks to get feedback on that portion.
Matt, do we have a copy in here in this packet of the thought exchange, since we're giving up our phones when we go into executive session?
I will get those to that.
It would be good if we could have a copy of the thought exchange. I did not print it at home. I should have, I'm sorry.
It would be nice to have the key themes,
Right.
and then maybe 1 or 2 or 3
Yeah, I just need the,
comments underneath.
yeah, whatever Betsy sent us today, just to be able to have that, since we won't have our phones to look at them.
I mean, and I would think some people may be more verbose on their answers, but I think, 5 minutes a question, I think we may be able to get through more than 6 questions for some
Okay.
folks, because I think some of the questions are going to may have more lengthy responses, but I think some are going to be
Maybe we could
quicker.
have like,
So some reserve questions,
yeah,
like
some
some
reserve
backup.
questions.
Well, one of the things that we probably make sure we need to do is the 4 unique questions probably need to be at the very beginning, because
Right.
those are probably what we're most passionate about, that individual question we might want to ask the candidates. We could do up to, instead of 2 questions, just have 4.
Just if we had some
We just
reserve
can't
questions.
ask some questions of one candidate and not to the other. We want to remain completely fair, and so that's where you just get into that if you run out of time with one and you have more with the other. So we can agree on 3, and then
Yeah, that is true, that you can't ask somebody who speaks quickly 10 questions and the next person who has more detailed answers 5 questions. That wouldn't be fair.
just from my experience in interviews, I have to believe 6 is a significant number of questions. I don't think with a half hour. And you have to remember too, and I think down here as well, we put in this, is that with the very last bullet point, which I accidentally skipped over, applicants will be permitted to ask their own questions. And so
Need to leave time for that.
we do want to leave time for candidates to be able to express their own thoughts and opinions or questions that they may have for the board to be able to answer. So we could go from 2 to 3, or I'm
Is it possible that, okay, we each submit 2 and have a unique question, which gives us what, 5 or 6? I mean, is it possible that as a group, for goodness sake, the 4 of us can't agree on 2 additional questions?
no, I mean, I think we'll be fine with it.
Okay.
Because I think,
Maybe just add 1 more, I don't know. I agree that I don't want to get to a point where there's no time at the end for them to ask questions. Many people have no idea what a school board member does.
Mhm.
And I think that they would, if they have questions about that, we should
sure.
allow the time to answer those.
So I'm open if we want to keep it at 2 or if we want to increase it.
we can just kind of wrestle with the questions and then come up with 2 or 3.
Okay.
We need to-
We could do 2.
I'm gonna change that
Three.
to 2 to 3.
Yeah, 3 on 2,
questions.
and then you can come up with a group with
It's
1
fine.
or 2.
Again, I think that the heart of probably what we're gonna be doing in the interviews, the heart of it is going to be the unique questions that we're bringing to the table.
Right.
So, all right, so after the meeting, all applicants will receive an email from myself by 9 p.m. So that's actually tonight. Those having been selected for an interview will be given a time to be interviewed either Saturday from 8 to 1 or Sunday 12 to 5. And the applicants have all received that communication and they're aware of the time frame. And I only had 2 come back that were needed an adjustment if they were called back for an interview. So going down to the interviews, each interview we've talked about will be allotted 30 minutes. I've created, if you notice at the bottom there, a 10-minute buffer in between. That was feedback that I had gotten on some of the calls, is just ensuring that there's time to not process, but time to kind of regroup in between, process people in and out of the rooms and things like that. We're going to be holding them here in this room, and we'll determine the Board of Education, or the questions this evening. And that bullet point kind of goes up with the top there. And then you'll see that, again, I just want to make sure that we understood based on what's legal and not, we need to be making sure that we ask the same questions to every single candidate. And then you'll see the time frame of the interviews there at the bottom.
How did you arrive at 14 individuals?
Well, so what we did was we took the time frame from 8 to noon, and then we did the 10 minutes, and then what we said was that how many might fit in there. Originally, we kind of talked about 15 at the last meeting, which we could still do. It would land on one day a little bit heavier and a little bit longer. So I just split it 7 and 7 to be 14. When I was, again, asking around and talked about interviewing, even 14, when I talked to some of our peers, it was, wow, that's a lot of people to interview. And again, every board's different and every community is different in how you want to approach it. I think we can all agree that interviewing 52 people is not appropriate. That's a lot of people, and there's a lot of people that, based on our metrics, we may not want to consider after we have discussion. And so in fairness of their time.
I do not agree with that statement.
Okay.
So noted. And
Okay.
the fact is that we agreed at our last meeting to 15. I
Okay.
think we should stick with 15.
Sure, great. Yep, absolutely. Where do
And
we
put it on
want it?
Saturday or Sunday.
It doesn't matter, we can add it on Saturday or Sunday.
Saturday.
Okay, so why don't we just add it, it would be then 12:50 to 1:20. And just one thing that we didn't have on here, but I just want to make sure that the community understands as well, because of COVID, we are more than happy to Zoom people into an interview. While they be held in person, we'll do everything we possibly can to work with the candidates or the applicants for the interview process. So I've gone ahead and made that change to 15 on here. Again, that was really just evening out the days on the calendar. Okay. Comments, questions, concerns?
Just logistics, will there be somebody to let them in downstairs?
Sure, no,
And we will let them know, just like you said, for COVID reasons, they come in person and not be now.
Yeah, so that's a good point. I mean, I think it goes without saying, but it's always good to identify that during the interviews, the applicants will be in this meeting. We're 6 feet apart and we'll remain 6 feet apart, but the health commissioner does require to follow the governor's ordinances of wearing masks indoors. So we'll all be masked up as well. And just so the community knows that too, I think it's important to know that that guidance did change. If you've noticed in some of our past board meetings, we wear our mask coming in and then we take our mask off once we sit down at the tables because we've been socially distant. And so the guidance that we're receiving now is that we need to keep our mask on the entire time, which is why I have them. So just want to be clear to that as well. Okay. All right. Any other questions? We'll put that to the side. At this point, I want to read a statement to the community.
Brad, real quick.
Yes, sir.
You need to read the back.
Oh, there's a back. Yes, Mr. Miller. Thank you so much. So then, of course, after the interviews are completed, the board's going to debrief. The colored dots we'll use as part of the process to mark. We're going to then mark those interviewees who are acceptable. And then we're going to be an opportunity to kind of review the dots. And what we want to do is we want to get to the point where we bring one candidate forward at the end of the day on Sunday. Contact interviewees versus candidate brought forward. I'm going to be calling all 15 of the interviewees that night on Sunday to let them know, or let the one appointee know that we would like to move forward to the board meeting on Monday. And then we'll call all the interviewees as well, just to update them and let them know. Sorry about that, I forgot to flip the page over. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and read directly off the statement because it'll speak for itself, but I'm going to turn and actually face the camera because I want to make sure that everybody can obviously hear really well. This afternoon, we will be responding to a public records request for information surrounding our former board member Todd Parnell's resignation. Before we do this, we believe it's important for our parents, staff, and community members to understand what led to his resignation, why we asked him to resign, and why we decided to allow him to cite personal reasons for his resignation. On Wednesday, August 26th, there was an incident at Lakota West parking lot after school involving the Westchester police officers and 3 teenagers, 2 of whom are students. That afternoon, Lakota West principal Ben Brown sent an email to parents to inform them of the incident. That same evening, Todd Parnell replied to Mr. Brown via email stating, quote, they should have shot them, end quote. Mr. Brown immediately notified Superintendent Matt Miller and Senior Director of Diversity and Inclusion, Mr. Elgin Card. Mr. Miller notified me as the president of the school board of the email that same evening. First thing, Thursday morning, August 27th, Mr. Miller, Lakota CFO and Treasurer Jenny Logan, and I met to discuss how to remove Mr. Parnell from his seat on the Lakota Board of Education. The decision was made quickly to ask Mr. Parnell for his resignation from the board. Unlike a company employee, as an elected official, a school board member cannot be immediately fired. Mr. Parnell's email to Mr. Brown was abhorrent, and it does not in any way reflect the values of this school board, school district leadership, or our school family. Mr. Parnell submitted his resignation via email to Mr. Miller and me at noon that same day. At this time, I, along with Mr. Miller and Mrs. Logan, called each of the remaining 3 board members to explain what had happened. We agreed to hold an emergency meeting that afternoon to accept Mr. Parnell's resignation. Approximately 2 hours later, Mr. Parnell rescinded his resignation, saying that he wanted to have further discussion with the board and his personal attorney. Less than 1 hour later, Mr. Parnell sent another email to Mr. Miller and me, changing his mind again and once again and resigned. The board met at 4:30 p.m. that same day to accept the resignation. As a board, we discussed how to react to Mr. Parnell's email to Mr. Brown and decided to not discuss it publicly out of sensitivity to Mr. Parnell's family, particularly his children. Once we responded to the media's request this afternoon, we have no doubt that this will become a story for other news outlets. We want you, our community, to understand that Mr. Parnell's vile comments have absolutely no place in this school district. The board acted swiftly and definitively to remove him from his seat. Our focus is now on finding the very best candidate for our community to fill the remainder of the open term on our school board. At this time, may I have a motion to enter into executive session to consider the appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, and compensation of a public employee or official?
Point of order, Mr. Lovell. When was the board notified that you were going to be releasing that statement? And when did the board approve that statement for release?
We have worked with our legal and we worked with our communications.
That was not
team.
my question. When was the board notified?
Whenever we got the text, at whatever time that was.
At
What time-
2:30
what time
PM
was
today.
So as we're driving out here today, that text was sent to notify the board?
Yes.
When did the board approve that statement to be released?
This statement was created yesterday with the consideration of moving towards today of releasing the statement to the
And
public.
why was the board not notified and given the statement to see it before you read it in a public meeting? I'm sorry, that's inappropriate.
Is that what legal said to do?
Yes.
That was our legal?
Yes.
Legal told you that that did not require board approval or even board notification before you released the statement.
In
And
our
it seems like a
discussions,
conversation with legal would be appropriate.
do I have a motion to move into executive session? Thank you. Ms. Logan, roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper,
Yes.
Mrs. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Connor,
Yes.
Mr. Lovell.
Yes.
Since we will not have any action after this, the Zoom will not be
Correct.
sitting there for
Correct.
3 or 4 hours.
Yes, there'll be
So
no
we're
board
not-
action following this. Yep.
Are we
Absolutely.
off?
I don't know if we're off or not.
Consent.